Hi, this is Andy Hoffman of CryptoGoldCentral.com, the sound money blog of the 21st century, in which I write daily of my vision of the future of money, in which gold plays a passive role and Bitcoin is the center of the universe. Try our free 7-day trial membership and contact me anytime at ahoffman@CryptoGoldCentral.com to ask about the blog or arrange cryptocurrency and/or precious metal related consultations. In my one-on-one podcast series, I seek to learn of and share the viewpoints of the Bitcoin community's top thought leaders and entrepreneurs. All episodes, including this, the 10th, can be found at CryptoGoldCentral.com, on my Twitter page at Andy_Hoffman_CG, and starting today, the World Crypto Network's YouTube channel and iTunes feed. This week, my guest is Chris DeRose, whose extremely popular Twitter handle is @DeRose. One of the crypto community's most popular communicators, he describes himself as a Bitcoin evangelist, public speaker, podcaster, and journalist, whose YouTube videos and World Crypto Network appearances are can't-miss events. To that end, welcome, Chris, to One-on-One.
Thank you so much, Andy. I appreciate being here.
Awesome, with that green screen behind you with Miami, or maybe it's Miami with the green screen behind you, but looks like you're having fun over there.
This isn't a green screen. I froze time. This is all real.
You're on the beach in a time machine. Okay, I got it. So anyway, last Thursday, my one-on-one podcast with Francis Pouliot coincided with a sweet spot of Bitcoin exuberance. One day after the 2x cancellation and one day before the historic Bcash pump scam. Today, just 1 week later, so much has occurred, it feels like the 2x cancellation, in my view, at the time, the most bullish event in Bitcoin history, was a minor event, as after watching prices peak at $7,900, Roger and Jihan's coordinated Bitcoin attack and Bcash pump saw prices plunge to nearly $5,500 within 48 hours, only to surge back to $7,500 today. Conversely, Bcash, armed with lies, propaganda, mempool spamming, and Ver selling a significant amount of Bitcoin, whilst his South Korean partners pumped Bcash on the notorious BitThumb altcoin exchange, surged all the way to $2,700 before being cut by 60 or 70% in the ensuing 72 hours. More importantly, the Bcash taking over Bitcoin meme, attempted in nearly identical fashion in mid-August, miserably failed yet again. To that end, it almost feels like Bitcoin has had two of its biggest political victories ever within the space of a week. To which I ask you, Chris, how do you interpret the ramifications of the 2x cancellation and Bcash pump failure on Bitcoin's near and long-term future?
Man, I love the build-up on that question. It's a whole narrative there, kind of like set me right into it, which is fine. There's very real conflict here. Everybody wants there to be a bad guy, and everybody wants there to be a good guy. And depending on which side you are, obviously, is how you build that narrative. Clearly, you are a Bitcoin Cash skeptic, and I think that's fine. You know, for me, there's a couple themes in that like narrative that, how to put it, I think are important to understand. First and foremost, there was a big question that we had to the degree of Bitcoin's immutability or Bitcoin's existence. Bitcoin's objectivity actually would probably be the best way to frame that debate in my mind. And the question was, what is Bitcoin? To which the answers were, it's a governance system, it's a node count, it's a amount of energy committed to the chain, and a few other incidental narratives there. They were all competing, and everybody was kind of sitting there on tenterhook waiting to see how this would resolve. And I kind of personally liked Bitcoin as a group these days. And I think that that's probably what it is. So when Bcash folded, when 2x folded, then we didn't really get a resolution to the question of what is Bitcoin, but I think we at least got to ask the question in a way that was meaningful. We had like permission to start exploring that. Because like in years prior, the people would say Bitcoin is whatever assumes the most energy. And that would be the implementation that we could decide on it or not, but the core implementation would appear to be that. You can call it the Bitcoin if you want. I don't really care. I prefer calling it core. And I like core. I think that's great. So yeah, when 2x died, we didn't really get to test the question of, is Bitcoin governance or is it the hash rate? The Though I think we got far enough of the dialogue to probably have people start answering that question on their own. Nonetheless, we moved past that post, and it seems like everybody wanted to gear up for war again. But for me, I don't think anybody sat down on their laurels and said, like, okay, well, we didn't have to go down this path of deciding is work Bitcoin. And people really were quick. There was like a 4-day, I felt like there was a 4-day window where everybody was just kind of like chill. And then the Bitcoin Cash against Bitcoin narrative started up again after the pump. And that's fine. I mean, Bitcoin is a story of conflicts and battles. And if that's the next one, then so be it. But for me, it's a little hard to take that battle as seriously as the prior battle. And while I love the work that everyone's doing to answer these questions of what is the true Bitcoin and is this a scam and who and what is correct, for me, I take a lot of solace in having proceeded to a point where the cash proponents would appear to be at least saying that they're not engaged in a zero-sum game and have moved on from this sort of minor conspiracy / collusion narrative, at least for now. We'll see if they bring that back up. So that's like the big themes that I see there. Now, we can talk a bit about what I actually think about Bitcoin Cash versus Bitcoin and the space, etc. But what do you think about that?
Right, and we'll get to that second part in a second. Here are my thoughts. So first of all, I am not a, quote, Bcash skeptic any more than I am not a gold bug. What I didn't like was the way that this whole team of Rajaver and Jihan has been going about their things for the past year. In fact, it's gotten to the point where I view the sector, and we just passed a real milestone, I think, in the last week where we're going to move on from that. But the sector of Bitcoin in general was very immature until very recently. I mean, we had a very small market cap. There was a lot of misinformation out there. A lot of people didn't understand what was going on. And so, as you look at what's happened in the past year, we've had 5 major attacks. And guess what? It's always these 2 guys behind it, whether it's Bitcoin Unlimited, the UAHF, the 2X, the Bcash, the second Bcash. It's always something related to the guy with the most Bitcoin and the guy with the most mining power. And you start to, I look at this and I'm going, these guys can pretty much, they know there's no inside information laws. They can do whatever they want. They can create hard forks. They can create misinformation. The amount of money that those 2 people are capable and have been capable of making simply by throwing their weight around in an immature, unregulated sector is astonishing. And the more that I see what they've done, especially with the mempool spamming and the astroturfing, there's no doubt in my mind that this is not fair and ethical behavior. And this is coming from me, who's watched the gold cartel abuse the gold market for 15 years. So I do have a bit of anger when I see that kind of stuff. Fortunately, I think that after the 2X was defeated, and now after Bcash, in my mind, has been defeated, I don't think these 2 guys are going to have as much sway, because I think the big institutional money is coming in and the worldwide knowledge of how this works is going to change. So look, good for Bcash if it wants to try to take some market share in the transactional part of the market, but I don't think there's a chance they're going to get in on the monetary value part of the market. I mean, how do you think about that?
Yeah, so I kind of like, honestly, what Bitcoin Cash is doing, and not for the reasons that people would probably think. I like the experimentation of governance. I like that they are taking on the transactions that Bitcoin Core doesn't want, and they are testing the predictions of some of the members of Core in their community. The predictions of Core would be that they would be very centralized, that there would be little in the way of censorship resistance, perhaps, that the number of relay nodes would go down as a result of these decisions, et cetera, et cetera. These are things that I believe will probably be the case for Bitcoin Cash. And if Bitcoin Cash wants to test these hypotheses out, I don't really see what the risk is to Core at this point that is so terrible. Now, all that being said, what you are also testing out here is, in fact, governance of any form. And what you've mentioned are effectively like tyrants of Bitcoin, these people who have unilateral control and seemingly little in the way of due process or a just meritocracy behind their decisions. And I think what's good about that is that gives them enough rope to either succeed and pull the traction to where they believe it'll go, which I think some of us are skeptical of, or they'll hang themselves with that rope, and then we'll have learned those lessons. Personally, I see Monero as being the most interesting in taking up the transactions that Core does not want. Now, for all these people that are talking about cash in the way that they are, it surprises me that they don't immediately seize on Monero as perhaps a better Bitcoin Cash than Bitcoin Cash is. And I like to promote that narrative now as well, because I think that Monero is a bigger competitor to Bitcoin Cash than Bitcoin Core is. And we can talk about why that might be if you'd like.
Yeah, I saw a tweet maybe a week or two ago that I wrote about, and someone said, if you can recreate or reinvent PayPal / MasterCard Visa, you got 4 times upside. But if you can recreate gold, you got 100 times upside. And that's, so again, for people who are in the space, most of them are sound money people for now. That's the bigger prize. So don't worry about if whatever his reasoning. If Roger Ver says you got to buy coffee, I think anyone owning Bitcoin now, or the vast majority, know you don't own it to buy coffee. You own it because you think it's going to be gold. And the beauty of what has just happened, and I agree, the more the merrier. Let them fork like crazy. I don't like how they did it, because they created all these horrible FUD situations. But they definitely have done some harm, with this competing for the for the hash power, which causes the networks to go haywire. But in the big picture, it doesn't matter. The more forks, the better, and the more forks, the more competition for Bcash than for Bitcoin. I mean, they're the ones who have to deal with, now they're going to have to deal with Bclassic and Bgold and Bcash Plus, Bcash Gold Plus, whatever it's called. So I think in the big picture, I'm all for more forks and more tests of governments, absolutely. And but the big picture is, I think the immutability of the Bitcoin blockchain, in my view, was completely solidified now, and that's why I'm so excited about what's going on. So to the next topic, I want to discuss what Brian Kelly of CNBC referred to last month, and I'll give kudos because it was on Adam Meister's show, as the wall of institutional money headed for crypto, which frankly I view as the single most important near-term trend in the space. Between the failure of 2x and the neutering of Bcash, at least from a digital gold standpoint, to even dent Bitcoin, much less damage it, the upcoming CME futures launch, which undoubtedly will be followed by ETF approvals, Bitcoin's likely permanent breaching of the key $100 billion market cap level, and of course the technical innovations made possible by SegWit activation, I believe the inflow of capital to the crypto space, largely to the Bitcoin ecosystem, will be unmatched in financial history, at least since the dot-com boom. Chris, my question to you is, do you agree with what I just said, or are there holes in my thesis? And either way, please lay out how you expect the cryptocurrency ecosystem to progress next year, both technically and financially.
Right. So this is, how long have you been in Bitcoin for? Is this like your first big bubble for you, or did you get into?
Me? No, I'm an old guy. I'm back for the. Actually, I was at Mt. Gox for a tiny bit, and I was there for the dot-com bubble and working on Wall Street. Cool. So I know bubbles when I see them. This ain't one.
You don't think so? Okay, so I actually think that this is very, very similar to what I saw in 13, when you saw a lot of people rallying around Bitcoin and lots of prognostications as to the capital entering and the great future that lies ahead. So I've seen this before at some level, and I don't know, like, I think, hold on, sorry, first it's not important if this happens. Yeah, no, so I've seen this before, and I don't know that anybody has that knowledge. The Bitcoin booms have generally been punctuated by these moments of mania. It gets everybody's attention, and people join the fray. And then at some point, either Mt. Gox explodes, as was one case. A pump just ended, as was another. I think like Roger Ver back in like 11 or so, or 12, was credited as unilaterally causing a bubble, and it just stopped because he stopped pumping. I don't think he intentionally did. The order books were so shallow back then; it wasn't hard. And on and on. So I don't know that I always accept that anybody has this knowledge of the money coming in. And I'm also very worried because everyone's greed is high. So like the predisposition that anybody would have is that more are coming, and the incentives that you have are to tell people that more are coming. But do you actually have the knowledge that more are coming? If you did, the price would be up to match, probably, if that was a de-risked consideration. So I'm actually a little skeptical. I don't know. I don't want to present to people that it's going down or that it's going up. I just think that hearsay is so difficult to count on with price. And you also don't know who's leaving the space. Don't forget, for everybody who comes into the space, there are many people that are leaving. And so, like, you don't know if Roger Ver, for example, is going to divest himself of all of his Bitcoin. Maybe he's already done it, but maybe he hasn't done it. At which point, he could probably drill the books down to very low levels of inventory.
Right, but Roger Ver, if he leaves Bitcoin, he's going to be cash. I mean, he is not a fiat guy. He's going to live and die, and so he's not leaving the sector. He may be leaving Bitcoin and good riddance, but he's definitely not leaving the sector.
But how that might be, but how much inventory of Bitcoin Core does he sit on, and how much will he be divesting himself from?
You know? I'm not sure, but there's two questions you're posing here. One is whether there's a bubble or not, and two, whether Wall Street is, or this institutional wall of money is coming. Now, as for the first part, of course, there's no way of knowing. It is possible, in hindsight, we'll look back and say this was a bubble. I completely disagree with that, though, because I see the adoption rates rising. And I think the world is starting to understand how valuable a commodity this is, particularly now that we've solved this immutability issue. This was what this year was about. Is Bitcoin immutable, or is it digital gold? So, governments could try to fight it all they want, but I think, if you ask everyone from the smartest people in the crypto community to people who are just observers, I don't think anyone really fears anymore that Bitcoin's going to be broken. So my guess is that the adoption will continue rising, but it is possible something comes in and changes that meme, and we'll see about that. The part that I'm far more confident about, though, is that the wall of institutional money is coming. And I was writing about this at Crypto Gold Central long before Brian Kelly was talking about it on Adam's show. I wrote about it way back in September. I said the 2018 budgets, both technically, especially now that SegWit's activated, and financially, are going to be huge. And the reason being, on the technical side is because of SegWit. On the financial side, it's because of this $100 billion market cap number. That number is a huge number from a fiduciary standpoint. It allows institutions to join a new asset class. They have thresholds, and when it gets to 500 billion, that'll be another one, and 1 trillion, that's another one. At some point, every institution in the world is able to invest in this. So believe me, if you're on Wall Street, yeah, the stock market's great, but you want to be in on bull markets, especially bull markets in uncorrelated assets like this. Now, the other thing is there proof? Guys like Mike Novogratz, who's become I think he's going to be the Warren Buffett character in this whole scenario, because he was the first guy to have a big hedge fund, and he's already made himself a billionaire. He's talking about what he sees in Wall Street, and what I've seen. I worked in Wall Street. I worked at hedge funds. January 1st is the key date. Probably 90% of hedge funds start on January 1st. From an accounting standpoint, that's what they do. They're liquid vehicles. They go in a calendar year. And now that at the same time we got SegWit, and we got these hard forks behind us, and the futures contract, and likely the ETFs, and the $100 billion market cap, and the January 1st coming, I couldn't be more confident that there's going to be, if you thought last January was good in this sector, that this one is going to be even better. That's just my view. I could be wrong. I mean, tell me tell me what I'm missing aside from just general overexuberance.
Yeah, well, I personally have not actually seen rising adoption rates. I've actually seen flat or even lowered adoption rates, with the exception of the ICO pump, which, if you looked at the price, the narrative that I would probably frame for much of this was that Bitcoin price was just kind of in the doldrums, doing what it normally does. It puts along. It's kind of, people leave the belief fundamental value is responsible for probably a significant portion, even of the number of transactions. And then the ICO crowd came in. And the ICO crowd may, in fact, be adoption at some level. People showed up and realized that perhaps this was the new stock market. And they started pouring in with money. They started buying Bitcoin alongside high-risk investments, the ICOs. Now, I think that it is unlikely that interest will continue. I think that that's already waning. I think there's a lot of risk currently on these ICOs in the form of SEC compliance. We're waiting to see what the SEC does about policing the space. So in that market, I'm actually rather bearish about adoption rates and even Bitcoin's performance. As for January 1st, what little I can say about that is that if, in fact, there is an event like gold buying season for hedge funds, that would be baked into the price, that other hedge funds would know about that, and or the hedge funds that start on the 1st would be dollar cost averaging into their investments, presumably even prior to the first, but perhaps not. So maybe that'll take off. But I'm actually a little bearish, despite the technology being as fundamentally sound as we've probably ever seen at the moment. I will say that. I think that that's extremely encouraging.
Well, when we move to the next question, you just showed your financial savvy about how people are going to price in the wall of institutional money beforehand. My guess is, though, that it's going to be more like a tsunami, and it will be far more difficult or it'll be underpriced, is what my guess is. But we'll see then. And also to follow up, just to clarify, when I say I see increased adoption, I see increased adoption in expectations as digital gold. When it comes to retail and vendors and that stuff, I think as the understanding and belief that Bitcoin will be digital gold has increased, especially now that the immutability of the chain is really not in doubt anymore, I think people are less inclined to spend it. And then, of course, you have all the myriad AML KYC stuff. I mean, God, banks are terrified of sending wires or receiving wires related to Bitcoin. So I think on that aspect, yeah, it's slowed down quote adoption rates, but it's definitely increasing adoption as far as people's belief in it as a store of value, which is why the price is going up. And also, as for ICOs, I agree. I think that was a bubble that has already burst. I mean, I don't know that. In fact, I think the big benefactor is going to be Bitcoin, because now we're going to see everything. These new altcoins start as hard forks. And so there's going to be a lot of crypto dividends out there. Some of them will be worthless. Some might be Bcash-like. And I guess we'll just have to wait and see on that. So
Can
now
I add
we're
that
going.
real quick?
Yes, go.
So two things on that. The first thing, I don't actually think that the ICO altcoin crowd is going to go away entirely, but I think that we're definitely going to see breaks for a while. So I actually do think that that's probably here to stay, if only because it's been around forever. There will be a new set of mania that'll probably accompany a new round of tokens and altcoins. But I think that the incentives of the space are such that for newcomers who want to work in the space of Bitcoin, the easiest place for them to work is in starting a Bitcoin competitor and then divesting themselves of that risk to get more Bitcoin. That's been extremely common, and it has just been a successful formula for a lot of people. When you think of people, and I think the most successful end of the newest round of Bitcoin millionaires, that's probably true for them. They probably started a scam of some kind or another, or at least a dubious pitch, and they accepted Bitcoin or Ethereum for that pitch. And then either they were luckily able to walk away, or they're still tied to that investment and they're wondering how they can maybe walk away. So I don't think that formula is actually a bad one, and I think that's going to continue. However, that being said, I think it's great that the SEC is coming in, because I think we need to put significant constraints on that development and put at least some semblance of sanity on the nature of claimants, their performance, accountability, etc. So it's conceivable that you would see like a compliance coin, not as like an actual offering, but like a series of compliance coins, in that they have significantly more scruples than the prior coins, which were just like invent an idea and tokenize it and walk away. That would be nice. We'll see if that ends up happening. As for digital gold, what is it about Bitcoin that is digital gold?
Right. Well, we're going to get to that one in a second. but I will follow up with what you just said on two things, because you bring up a lot of good points. One, I actually believe I have an article out there that says ICOs are the future of financing. I think that not the current ICOs where it's just completely Wild West, where just Joe Schmo could say, yeah, send me some Bitcoin, I promise you I'll do stuff. No, I think it will evolve. I think the true dinosaurs of finance or stocks and bonds, they've been way overused and abused by Wall Street corporate titans, governments, to the point where they are so inefficient, like the banking system itself. So I believe decentralized financing is the future. Just where we do have to have some sort of regulation, or more importantly, we need some etiquette and some understanding of how the game works, and eventually it's going to be so much more efficient than what we have now. And I also agree 100%. I've talked about this before. There's going to be the mother of all manias in everything related to cryptocurrency. That's going to make what we saw this summer. I mean, heck, this summer when it happened, it was Bitcoin getting hit like these guys. Ethereum's going to flip it and all that stuff. No, there's going to be a major mania at some point down the road. Maybe it's next year. Maybe it's sometime further. And yes, there will be a lot of .com like movements. As for digital gold, well, let's move on to the next question. And it's obviously a topic near and dear to my heart, albeit a lot less near and dear since finding Bitcoin 2 years ago. and converting to full-fledged all-in status earlier this year, i.e. gold. Specifically, the ongoing debate regarding the storage of value properties of history's oldest and newest money, which I bring up as a result of listening to Chris's must-watch interview with Peter Schiff on his Bitcoin Uncensored YouTube channel, titled Bitcoin versus Gold. Peter Schiff defends gold and specie. And by the way, I have not heard the word specie in a long time, so kudos to find that word out of your vocabulary. As a 15-year veteran of the precious metal market, I have been knee-deep in this debate from the time Bitcoin emerged onto the monetary scene. In Bitcoin's early days, I considered gold the superior asset, but as it matured, I viewed the two assets as twin destroyers of the fiat regime. However, having progressed from a speculative asset to an anti-fragile, immutable force this year, I now view Bitcoin as the world's purest, most useful form of money, superior to gold, despite the fact that gold will always remain valuable. To that end, I wrote an article earlier, oh yes, it was today, regarding my new world view of gold as an inflation-adjusted savings account with a call option on crisis. As for Chris, if you watch the video, you'll see he has a unique understanding of gold, particularly in comparison to Bitcoin. I can't wait to get his views on the topic, but first I have to ask you, how on earth did you lure Peter Schiff onto your YouTube channel?
You know, a lot of people, okay, a lot of people, the demographic that I think I've gathered has been an interesting one. There seems to be a decent number of influencers there, and a lot of people talk on the front lines of the meme wars or the Bitcoin wars, whatever the hell you want to talk. And I think it's great and it's needed, and I do it too, even regularly. But I like to sometimes step back a little bit, I think, and do a little bit of meta dialogue on strategy and an attempt at least to understand what the forces are and to provide perhaps, I don't know, a bit more management or leadership function in terms of my advice, at least with people. So the types of people that listen to my show, I think, are at least one step removed from the daily dramas. And I think because of that, it's provided a social network for me of other like-minded people. And in such an audience, there was one person who had a in with Peter Schiff's crowd and said, "Hey, you should really talk to him." Now, honestly, my honest and true goal was to put Bitcoin and gold on equal footing with Peter Schiff. I didn't want to have a debate with him where I said Bitcoin is better than gold. I wanted to say, look, they're the same, but one takes up space and one doesn't. And I wanted ideally to have a conversation about what is gold like about Bitcoin. And we didn't get that far. Unfortunately, I felt like Peter, I wrote him a very heartfelt email. I spelled these things out. And I was hopeful that Peter would want to kind of decouple his aggressive identity from our interview at a interest of finding some level of common ground. I think cynically, I suppose I could accuse him of thinking maybe that I was weak for thinking that. Or maybe cynically, I could accuse him of just not reading my emails. I don't know which. But when that interview started, it was just like battle mode a little bit. And I was like, okay, I guess we'll do it that way. And so then it kind of turned into what it was. And that was the start to finish process was, I think, doing the right kind of show, getting the right kind of listener, and getting the right kind of intro. But what ended up happening on camera was like completely decoupled from that. So who the hell knows?
Well, no, you did exactly what you set out to do.
Okay,
you were desperately trying to say in a very non-adversarial way, tell me why gold is better than Bitcoin, and I will counter what you say by saying here are some points otherwise. But he just did a kind of like Clubber Lang and Mr. T, just coming out swinging with his typical stock answers. He could have been talking from from President Trump to a 5-year-old. He has his stock answers. He's going to attack Bitcoin and say everything the opposite of what you say. And I think you did a great job of letting him hang himself. Now, if he could have done a good job in proving his case, that would have been great, like you're in court. But he didn't. And it's sad. This is a big, aside from the fact that I now believe more in Bitcoin, a big reason I wanted to leave the gold community after all those years is just there's a lack of open-mindedness, which is it's kind of ugly to watch. And at the same time, it's very unprofitable for people listening to you. So anyway, let's now get down to the brass tacks. Well, first, how long have you been studying gold's attributes, and how have your views on its attractiveness relative to Bitcoin evolved? To that end, what's your conclusion regarding the gold versus Bitcoin debate? Although I think I know the answer, regarding their relative attractiveness as store value assets.
Yeah, so gold wasn't something that I was really into prior to Bitcoin, honestly. It was something that was interesting to me. I had received gold from my grandparents as a younger man, and it was just interesting. I don't think that it was like magical. I think it was just interesting. It wasn't holy. It didn't have this sort of like a virtuous store value proponent or quality to it that I see like a lot of libertarians believe that it has. That being said, I wasn't like pessimistic about it either. I think that when Bitcoin happened, at that point, I was like, okay, well, I got to take a look at gold a little bit better to see what I think about these things. And really, at the time on Bitcoin Talk and elsewhere, people were kind of pushing gold comparison in your face anyway. The Misons were out in full force, and they were constantly drawing analogies, conclusions, et cetera, from gold and applying it to Bitcoin. So like that was really where I think I started to learn a little bit more about gold. And from there, you sort of learn like the large tropes, the history of gold. You hear about the Hunts cornering the silver market, all these types of things. And then you look into some stuff that perhaps isn't part of the like libertarian canon. And that's kind of where I ended up, was in between the two a little bit. And I wouldn't consider myself an expert on gold, but I'm a little bit more into the modern finance than classical, because I think that there's this like argument from antiquity is one lazy way of putting it, but it's not quite that. There's like this sort of Ludditism, I think, that can be found in the gold circles, and I think you see that with Peter Schiff. And it doesn't just apply to gold; it applies to finance in general. So for me, like the easy answer to what I think Bitcoin and gold has is their liquidity and their bearer instrument.
Gold?
No, gold. Bitcoin and gold, the actual rock.
Okay, I heard Bitcoin gold. I'm going,
Bitcoin and gold. Sorry, yeah. So the similars that Bitcoin and rock gold has is the market that exists that provides liquidity to this proposition, and I think the bearer instrument status. So I think that those are the two big things. From there, there's some incidental stuff, but I think a lot of it has to do with the regulatory spectrum or the regulatory framework around these products. The U.S. government and other governments worldwide seem to either reluctantly or, I think reluctantly, but with some degree of acceptance, provide these products for people. I think because they probably recognize that these products will have a market of some kind. And I think that what they try to do is decrease the liquidity to a degree that they can sustain and control, that makes people happy to a degree that's a net benefit overall, without letting it get too out of hand. So I think that Bitcoin shares that with gold. And other than that, I don't know that they actually do have much in common. There's this meme that was chosen, I think, in part to attract the demographic of gold bugs into the space. Or perhaps Satoshi was himself, a true believer of the demographic of gold bugs. But to the degree that it's digital gold, well, it's kind of a fabrication to me in many ways. It acts like it, sure. But is that all there is? Maybe. I don't know. What do you think?
Right. Well, a couple of things you brought up. I mean, to me, it's pretty simple. We're talking about, the whole thing with the gold's been around for 5,000 years. That means it's superior. That's just like the most ridiculous thing. But because something has been around, it doesn't mean it can be improved on. That goes for any aspect of life. And the way I put it, we were taught, I look at the old financial system as the Flintstones versus the Star Trek in the future. Star Trek definitely trumps Flintstones as far as practicality, and that's what it comes down to. Two things. One is practicality. Gold has usages. Certainly during times of crisis, it is decentralized with quotes around it, because it's far more easy to control than say Bitcoin. But the fact is that practically on every checklist, Bitcoin is going to win on every box. It's going to check every box. And the other part is old versus young. Like you mentioned, libertarians are into gold. The thing is, libertarians are older people. It sounds like it's this like new thing, but no, it's not. It's just kind of a rebranding of what older people who are into politics have done. Younger people don't care about this stuff. They just care about practicality and freedom, and they want less government. That's why Bitcoin is come around. We want less banks. We want less government, and so the newer generations. I've said I sold my silver, and I kind of almost laugh at silver now at the thought of, of like a millennial saying, yeah, I want to buy 1,000 pounds of silver to store my value, as opposed to storing $1 million of Bitcoin in my head. So I think, between practicality and age, there's just no question. And as the older generations, which have most of the wealth, pass on, they are going to be giving their wealth to the younger generations who have no interest in the old ages. So I think gold has served a purpose for many years, and given the crashing of the fiat system, which is inevitable, I think it's going to be a great asset. But I just don't think it's any longer going to be the premier monetary asset, or frankly, even close. Now, finally, I'd like to discuss the myriad things you are up to, both professionally and as part of the Bitcoin community. At ChrisDeRose.com, you describe yourself as a public speaker, lecturer, YouTuber, and journalist, as well as lead organizer of the South Florida Bitcoin Group and an accomplished software developer, plus the owner of 2 amazing cats. Tell us more specifically the type of things you're up to.
Gotta update some of that stuff. Yeah, how to say it. I mean, life has been good to me. I was I've always been a very lucky person. And I have a lot more freedom in my life, I think, than most people do. And like, I'm watching some of these Bitcoin guys like Roger Ver, who takes that freedom and goes into the Roger Ver direction. I'm watching guys like Daniel Larimer, who does the same thing in his direction. And like, honestly, I think I really enjoy talking to interesting people about interesting things. I really like watching the groups work these days as well, and seeing how virtue, I think, works in society. It's a very complicated thing that I've never had the ability to do in my prior life, or the medium to use prior to like YouTube and all these new amazing technologies. In terms of like professionally, I don't know that I believe in that anymore. It's funny. I watch these people in suits, and like I have these like very like complex views, I think, of like what that means at this point. But like people opt into objectification of their identity in many capacities, and chiefly amongst those is when they get into suits, they want to be objectified as like a success object, and I think that's great. But like, it's hard for me to see them as a depersonalized person, as having like the same level of virtue in the Bitcoin context. Like the places that we've come from are significantly more personalized than what we see in prior generations. And actually, this kind of touches into a little bit about how the millennials, I think, work. For a lot of people that are gold bugs, there's like these begrudging labels of millennials, that they're bad with credit, or that they are, they're not ambitious, or there's not this, or there's not that. I'm a little bit more optimistic about them. I certainly think that they need to be taken significantly more seriously than they're being taken. Like, you can't just lament their existence because they're here. And like, what are you going to do? You're going to like have an alternate history where they were gone from the earth? No, like, you have to change because you're going to die. They're going to stay around a little bit longer than you are, not the other way around. So like, for people that want to like hoard gold and say like, no, the millennials are wrong because the millennials should believe in gold. Well, good luck with that strategy, because what I'm seeing is that the millennials are going to take on new attitudes. They're going to have, like, they want tiny homes. They don't value money as much. They don't value cars as much. Frankly, I kind of like that. I think that there's a little vulgarity to like fetishization of money sometimes. Granted, I think capitalism is what we need, always great, should be promoted. But sometimes I think it's like in the creative spaces, or even in the social organization spaces, it's a little bit more heavy-handed than is fruitful. So like, I am personally exploring a lot of these themes and sharing that knowledge with others that listen to the show, hopefully so that they can themselves use these themes to either enrich themselves or gain more friends, acclimate better to where society might be going, etc. I have a Patreon account that I think is great. I use it to buy all the crap in my studio here. I have like a very simple rule that like, I'm not, though I make propaganda, I do it, I think, with the support of a team. So like, here you go. Like, this is a team effort right here. Like, all this shit. Like, yeah, I could buy this myself. And actually I did, frankly, if I had to be honest. But then like with the Patreon, like, money comes in to like improve the space. And so like, I don't know, I rely on those donations from people, I think, to grow the channel, to see if there's any value here. Is there virtue to the channel or not? I mean, like the Russians, I think, would just go ahead and like, at least per the conspiracies, outright buy friends and identities. And it could have gone that route, as I was thinking about it. I'm like, well, I could do that. It'll cost me this much per year. And I see other guys in the space doing that.
The sector needs production value. I mean, look what I got here. But aside from that, I mean, we're allowed to try to tell our story. I mean, Peter Schiff, how much money does he spend on his
Right.
production? And the advice he's giving is bad advice. And again, he's the perfect example of someone who talks down about millennials. He was doing it on your show as if they're bad people, and it's just so silly. First of all, the reason that millennials have so much troubles in the world is because, well, a combination of overpopulation and the policies of his generation, which have saddled them with so much debt that it's impossible to get married, to have a big house, to have ambition in a lot of aspects of the world, which have been crowded out by what the baby boomers have done. And it's just kind of silly. A lot of it is survival. Some of it express it in ways that are not favorable, but some people in Generation X and the baby boomers do that too. There's nothing different. It's just, I think it's older people, being pontificating when they are the ones who someone should be pontificating to. And I know it's funny also, you said, they're hoarding gold while the young guys, no, they're not. No one's hoarding gold. That's the whole point. You got a bunch of guys like him who think everyone should hoard gold. But most people don't have much money. Even the baby boomers who talk that way, they're saddled in debt. And so the whole society is going to have to, the monetary system has to reprice itself and change itself to something that is not, that doesn't hurt the younger generations and force the older generations to pretend they're doing better than they are. And that's what's so great about Bitcoin, because I think for the first time, I am optimistic about what the future is, and the millennials are going to be right in the front of that future, and then the Gen Zs right behind them, and the Gen A's and B's. But anyway, tell us further about some of the things you're up to. Like, what is Bitcoin Censored, your station,
Yeah.
doing, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna brand to DeRose Uncensored because I do. There was like a few reasons. I think I'm gonna rebrand to DeRose Uncensored. I have a group of guys that are very like-minded, interesting people in the Briar Patch that is becoming part of the brand. It was started as a place for like well, it was a lot of reasons it was started, but it was started as a place I think for a lot of people to come and share ideas, and it has certainly achieved that. I wanted to put a governance system in place, but it kind of turned into at least what I would hope would be a benevolent dictatorship, if only because of the rules of Telegram. We try to do it another way, but you can't control, you can't like transfer custody over it. It got complicated, so like the Briar Patch may just be my brand. But yeah, I've tried a couple things out. Like I'm trying to I'm trying to explore like a lot more of like the Bitcoin ethos, matters of Bitcoin faith, matters of Bitcoin morality. Weirdly, it was very reluctant for me to end up there for a lot of reasons. I try to deny the existence of these things for very convenient and honest reasons throughout time. But reluctantly, we've kind of come to a point where like these questions need to be tackled directly because they're part and parcel with governance issues, and they're part and parcel with advertising campaigns. Like I'm relatively shameless about the degree of promotion that we do. Like I actually don't think that it's a tort to be aggressive in some of the campaigns that we've done to change opinions of other groups, other people, etc., because they're doing it. So like the question is like, okay, if the interface is declared this is acceptable, you see this coming out of Bitcoin Cash, you even see this coming out of Bitcoin Core. Like, okay, now we have to decide like when, where, and how is this appropriate? How does it work, and how can we be better at it, and how can we do it in a way that is forward thinking for the community and that doesn't sacrifice virtuous principles? So like that's kind of what I've been working with. And one of the things that I do is I just talk to people about their opinions on the matter. So if you look at my channel, you'll see a lot of that. The kind of people that get attracted to that, I think it's a smaller crowd than what you'd see with like price predictions and such. So I think the numbers are significantly higher there, technical analysis, etc. But there's a more like a consideration to the people that I think are involved in these discussions, and I think that they're probably more influential as well. So a lot of the stuff that we end up starting, you'll see filter out into like all the other channels over time, sometimes immediately, sometimes after a few months, and I enjoy that. That process itself has been a lot of fun for me, and I'd like to take it a little bit out of the Bitcoin space as well. I think one of the mistakes we make here in Bitcoin is having a tunnel vision where we just market to each other our ideas, our products, etc. And I've noticed that successes such as Ethereum, such as Steemit, as much as I think that they're very dubious propositions, they were successful because they attracted people from outside of the space. So like, I'm not trying to sell anything other than maybe like Patreon support, but like that goes into the sort of machine of promotion of group value. So like, I don't know. I mean, the truth is that it's not like a professional outfit. It's kind of like guys having fun in the space. And that's really, I think that's okay as an answer. Some people don't like to hear that.
I think you're filtering out the zeitgeist, and a big part of that is the cryptocurrency space, the movement, not just the Bitcoin as an investment or even as a change in the monetary system. There's a change in the world going on that has to do with more freedom and less censorship, and a transition from an old guard to a new guard, and not just and what I mean by it's going to be younger people that are going to be making bigger decisions in the future, because the big governments are just not working, and people have been revolting in many ways. You see the social and political changes around the world, but I really think that it's going to focus on this decentralized monetary system, which takes away the biggest source of power that the let's call it the 1% have had. So you're just kind of talking and finding ways to bring out, how people are thinking, not just about money, but about all kinds of things. And I think it's fantastic. And unless you have some final thoughts, we'll just move toward the end here.
Well, I have to say, I am actually highly skeptical of the displacement of fiat, of the displacement of incumbent systems. I actually think most of them work pretty well. That being said, if it happens, great. Like it's weird, I've done this for multiple times now, where like somebody makes an extraordinary claim, and I'm just like, okay, whatever. And then you know what? It works out for the guy. Oftentimes with hilarious like results, oftentimes with unintended side effects, and on and on. So like I'm trying to be a little bit less quick to judge, but it's hard for me to like. Here's the thing: is that like, who's using Bitcoin if not speculators and the underserved? I think it's great. I love the underserved, and I think it's great that people are speculating. I think there's reasons to do so, but at the end of the day, I don't see it being significantly cheaper than incumbent systems, if any at all cheaper. And I do see significant problems as a result of these systems, not having to do with like technical malfunction or anything like that, but just having to do with their use as a bearer instrument. Like like you have to consider that at the very apex of this thing was the invention of bearer instruments online. And it's not like we haven't had those before. We've already got a body of knowledge about what that means, albeit in IRL mediums. So a big part of that body of knowledge is that people do not generally like bearer instruments for all the reasons we've seen, thefts and heists and deleted hard drives and forgotten passwords, etc. And so I'm a little skeptical that this will replace fiat for a number of reasons. That's one. Another one would be the unit of account issues. I think that'll be not just a trivial challenge. I think that's just like always going to be volatile, and that's not easy. So that all being said, I think there's a lot of promise and potential here, and I love it. But I'm a little wary of some of those prognostications.
Right. Well, the thing that's unique about me, especially in this space where at 47 years old, I feel like I'm a great grandfather, is that I do straddle these generations. I'm right in the middle of the baby boomers and the millennials. So I have a little view from both sides. And on top of that, I also happen to be, I would say, one of the world's most well-known monetary commentators. I've been following sound money for 15 years exclusively, professionally as well as personally. And it's my professional view that fiat currency is the principal root of a lot of the evil that the world has gone through over generations, over centuries.
Do you see?
Yes.
Do you see that you're using moral terms? Do you see that the notion of what is a sound money versus an unsound money is in your mind defined? Do you see that there's an evil that's being combated, or do you see it? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm more combative in nature. Maybe it's part.
It's okay. I love combat. You don't have to apologize for that.
It's part personality, but it's part what I've been through. I mean, people if you're new to Bitcoin, you couldn't imagine what I've been through fighting the gold cartel wars and losing them for 15 years. It has not been fun. But my point is, yes, I do believe it's more than just unsound money that has wrought all this debt and social inequity upon the world and inflation. I think it is morally evil, and it's abused. It's very easily abusable. There's a handful of people in every country, be it the third world or the first world, who control the money. I mean, J.P. Morgan once said, I don't care who's in charge. I want to be in charge of making the money, because you can pretty much write the rules and you can steal as much as you want, and that's what they do. And until this crazy thing was invented only 10 years ago, there was really no way to fight back. There's always going to be a powers that be, and they're always going to win. But I really think that it's not going to be tomorrow. I don't think we're going to wake up like in 2018 and, oh my God, there's no more fiat currency. Everyone's using Bitcoin. But I do think that, just like I said, ICO finance is going to replace stocks and bonds over time. I believe that cryptocurrency is going to slowly but surely, dramatically over time, usurp the market share of fiat. Will it completely take it over? No, of course not. There's so many societies in the world that use all different kinds of currencies, but I do believe its prominence is going to be incredible in a decade or two, and that the people who have been running these systems are not going to have as much power. That's just the way that I look at it. But it will take a very long time to happen. That I'm sure of. So with that, why don't we conclude today's podcast featuring one of the sector's most intelligent and entertaining Bitcoin thought leaders, Chris DeRose. Follow him on Twitter at DeRose, as well as his YouTube channel, which was Bitcoin Uncensored, but apparently it's going to be DeRose Uncensored, and at chrisderose.com. As for me, please check out the free 7-day trial membership at my brand new website, cryptogoldcentral.com. Sign up for a full year for the nominal fee of $225, or contact me at ahoffman@cryptogoldcentral.com. Thanks, and have a great crypto day.